Hey guys, tonight we journey back to 18th century France, a place where powdered wigs were tall corsets were tighter than your email inbox on a Monday, and tropical fruit was a legitimate threat to your social survival. You're at the glittering gates of Versailles. The chandeliers drip crystal, the perfume is heavy, and somewhere in the background, a violinist is sight-reading with exhausted elegance. And amid this dizzying opulence a pineapple, just sitting there. Not eaten, not sliced. Just sitting on a silver pedestal like a jeweled artifact, and it's causing silent, seething panic. See, you probably won't survive this world not because of the guillotine yet, but because you don't know how to properly display a pineapple without getting roasted in the drawing room. One fruit, one misstep, and poof, your reputation is pulp. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at Versailles not as a commoner, but as one of the glittering elite drenched in lace reeking of jasmine water. Possibly hungry because powdered faces don't allow for wide chewing. Everyone's gossiping about the Marquise's latest affair and her rival's newest centerpiece, an actual pineapple. It gleams under candlelight like something sacred. Not sliced, not juiced, just admired. Your eyes widen not from hunger, but sheer financial panic. That fruit costs more than your cousin's entire inheritance. It's not just fruit, it's a weapon. A pineapple at this point in French history represents colonial wealth, exotic reach, and horticultural prowess. This isn't something you bought at a market. This is a sign that someone in your estate has connections in the Caribbean and access to a glasshouse warm enough to mimic tropical humidity in France. And glasshouses, let's be honest, are ridiculous. They are ornate, humid, fuel-devouring greenhouses, custom-built for the elite to possibly harvest one pineapple over the course of 2 years. Historians still argue whether France's first pineapples were more a triumph of agriculture or sheer reckless vanity. You can feel the tension rise in the salon. Someone's murmuring that the pineapple was grown locally, which would mean the host is a horticultural prodigy. Someone else claims it was shipped in from Martinique. Less impressive, more expensive, but still socially terrifying. Because if your rival could import one and you didn't even have an orchard, you were already a ghost at court. A lady in blue raises her fan not for flirtation, but for shielded gossip. She whispers that someone once touched a pineapple centerpiece without gloves. The room gasps, and a baron looks like he might faint. You inch closer to the fruit, pretending casual curiosity, while absolutely sweating under your powdered wig. The golden scales, the spiky crown, the impossible freshness. It looks like it fell straight out of Eden. Or maybe the Caribbean. Or maybe your host is lying and it's wooden. Yes, people made fake pineapples just to compete. They'd lacquer gourds or carve wax models and spray them with imported pineapple water. No, really. That was a thing. The pineapple is like a royal test. You must admire it, but not too much. Comment, but not with too much awe. And never. And I mean never suggest it should be eaten. That would be social suicide. Eating, it implies you don't understand its true function. Silent intimidation through expensive fruit. You walk away, careful not to trip on your embroidered shoes, and nod politely to the host. Exquisite selection, you murmur. She beams. You passed. Barely. Later that evening, a quiet scandal erupts. Someone heard that another noble accidentally displayed a bruised pineapple last month. Bruised. Can you imagine? The shame. The whispers. They had to cancel a whole dinner. Historians still debate whether it was a shipping mishap or careless storage, but the family didn't show their faces for weeks. You slip away into a corridor lined with portraits of nobles long forgotten. All of them probably judged harshly for their fruit choices. You wonder if any of them died of embarrassment before they ever faced revolution. And as the candles flicker and the polished floors creak under careful footfalls, you think to yourself, this world is exhausting. Beautiful, sure, but exhausting. You can wear the right coat, speak the right lines, marry the right cousin, but if your pineapple's off color, you're finished. And maybe, maybe that's why so many nobles feared it. Not because it was dangerous to eat, though. Some thought it was more on that later. But because in a society built on fragile symbols, nothing was more terrifying than holding one wrong. It's just a fruit. But here tonight, it's also your social lifeline, or your doom. You've made it through one evening with the pineapple unscathed, but that was just the start. Because here's the real kicker in 18th century France. You're not supposed to eat the pineapple. You're not even supposed to pretend it's food. You display it. You parade it. You subtly position it near a well-lit mirror, so it can catch the flicker of candlelight like a crown jewel. It is not dessert. It is diplomacy. And yet, you find yourself whispering to a friend the next morning in the garden. What happens if someone does eat it? Her eyes widen. Oh, you mustn't. She leans in. It's not for consumption. It's for power. Pineapples weren't just exotic. They were elusive. You didn't pick one up at the corner market on your way to a soiree. No, each one had a journey from the sun-soaked fields of Saint-Domingue or Martinique, across treacherous Atlantic waters in crates lined with straw and prayers, possibly kissed by salt air, definitely bruised by a careless sailor. And if it survived all that, congratulations. You're holding a fruit worth more than a silk gown, and naturally, the moment it arrives, you put it on a pedestal. Literally, people displayed pineapples like trophies, like the Mona Lisa with a rind. Some nobles had special dishes made for them, silver stands with velvet cushions. Some surrounded them with flowers or positioned them between marble busts. Occasionally, a pineapple would sit in the same spot for days, gradually decaying into a lumpy, sweet-smelling collapse, while guests pretended not to notice. You think about the sheer pressure. There's a silent rule. The more relaxed your pineapple display, the more powerful you are. That's the great irony. You can't look like you tried. If the fruit is arranged too carefully, if the lighting is too obvious, if your servants accidentally call attention to it, you look desperate. A real noble lets the pineapple speak for itself. So you learn the code. You nod approvingly at the Comtesse's table arrangement, where a pineapple casually leans near a half-empty wine carafe. You frown just barely when a rival marquis has 2 pineapples on display, which is both vulgar and suspicious. No one has that kind of access. Either he's lying or he's planning a coup. Historians still debate the origin of the display-only rule. Some suggest it came from England, where pineapples had earlier taken root as a decorative novelty. Others argue it emerged organically in France due to scarcity. Either way, eating the thing was seen as gauche, like slicing open the Mona Lisa to see what it tastes like. That doesn't stop people from wanting to eat it. Everyone says they don't care that they prefer figs, that pineapples are too tart, too tropical. But you see the way eyes linger on it. You hear the quiet sighs as the fruit rots untouched. Everyone wants a bite, no one dares take it. You remember the story of the Duc de Montmorency, who legend says sliced his own pineapple in front of guests during a midsummer banquet. The room went silent. A servant dropped a ladle. Someone fainted. The Duke, oblivious, served thin slivers of pineapple to every guest, praising its brightness and sun-baked tang. 3 guests vomited from sheer stress. The next day, the Duke's estate was mysteriously vandalized. Rumors flew. Someone said the pineapple was cursed. Someone else claimed the Duke had offended the king himself by devouring a diplomatic object. No one quite knows the truth. Historians still argue whether Montmorency ever existed, or if he's just a cautionary tale told to impressionable young nobles to keep their knives sheathed. But the fear is real. There's something oddly powerful about food you're not allowed to eat. It becomes sacred, untouchable. That tension hums beneath every banquet, even as laughter flows and powdered heads bob and nod. There's always someone eyeing the fruit and wondering, what if I just took a bite? And then there's the fear of the faux pineapple. As we hinted before, people faked them all the time. A pineapple was so valuable that nobles would commission replicas made of waxwood or even dyed potatoes to avoid the cost or delay. And then they'd hire servants to carry them into parties like sacred relics with expressions of utter boredom, as if they saw tropical fruit every morning before brushing their wigs. But if anyone found out, scandal. A fake pineapple could ruin you. You'd be mocked in poems, parodied in paintings whispered about for years. There are records, though, sparse and often second-hand, of nobles being quietly uninvited from court for pineapple fraud. And you can't just pass off a fake as real forever. At some point, someone will notice the fruit hasn't changed in a week, or it smells like beeswax, or it melts near a candelabra. One poor vicomte reportedly displayed the same pineapple for an entire season, until a child poked it and said, "Papa, it's warm." The family left Paris by dawn. So, here you are in your finest waistcoat with a powdered wig itching under your hat, watching yet another tropical fruit ruin someone's life. You smile politely. You sip your wine. And inside you whisper to yourself, never trust a fruit you can't eat. You've been to 3 soirees this week, and each one is more pineapple-laden than the last. It's starting to feel less like a fruit craze and more like an arms race. Except instead of swords, everyone's brandishing spiky tropical crowns grown thousands of miles away. And now you've been invited to the estate of the Comte de Valgrasse, a man rumored to possess not 1, but 5 functioning orangeries. But here's the twist. He doesn't grow oranges. He grows pineapples. Only pineapples. Your carriage winds through manicured gardens and under arches of climbing roses until, finally, the glass house looms huge, glinting, and absurdly warm even in the crisp spring air. As you step inside, the humidity hits like a perfumed slap. Steam clings to your sleeves. The scent is thick. Earth, sweetness, heat. And then you see them nestled like jeweled eggs in beds of straw. Pineapples. Real ones, dozens. Some still green. Others golden and ready. All of them guarded more carefully than royal documents. This, you realize, is the heart of the madness. The botanical bragging rights. In the 18th century, having a functioning hothouse in Europe was like owning a private rocket ship today. It was technological overkill for the sake of exclusivity. These pineries, as they were sometimes called, required a small army to manage special compost, intricate ventilation, rotating glass panels, coal-fired flues under the soil, and of course endless funding. A single pineapple plant could take 2 years to bear fruit in these conditions. 2 years for one fruit, and you thought your herb garden was high maintenance. But if you could pull it off, you were more than rich, you were visionary. A noble with an in-house pineapple wasn't just wealthy. They were seen as sophisticated, learned, maybe even enlightened. Maybe historians still argue whether these horticultural displays were truly respected or simply tolerated as wealthy nonsense. You trail behind the Comte as he gives you a private tour. His tone casual, but his eyes sharp, watching your reaction like a hawk in brocade. We find the Dutch compost too warm, he muses, brushing non-existent dust from a leaf. Ours is a balanced manure mixture. Cow, sheep, a whisper of horse. You nod, trying not to laugh at the idea of someone measuring a whisper of horse manure. He gestures proudly at a particularly bulbous specimen. That one's named Jules. He says I sang to it as a seedling. This is what we're doing now. Naming the pineapples, Jules sits in the corner blissfully unaware of his own social significance. You remember hearing about the Château de Richelieu, where a noblewoman insisted her gardeners wrap each fruit in silk scarves to protect them from the emotional chill of French winters. Another estate hired musicians to play lute music for their plants, convinced it stimulated growth. And in Versailles, rumor has it the Queen's gardener once kissed a pineapple every morning for luck. Historians still debate whether that's true, or if it was just a jab at the gardener's unusually close relationship with his compost heap. But the point is growing. Pineapples wasn't just agriculture. It was theater, and if you were a noble who didn't have the timeland or delusion required to grow your own, you could always fake it. You'd order a Caribbean shipment, expensive and unreliable, or you'd rent one from a fruit broker. Yes, we'll get there. Or you'd make a diplomatic arrangement with someone who did grow them, and casually let slip that it was a gift, not a favor. But the purest flex was this: the botanical boast. To grow your own, to walk your guests through your steaming, mossy shrine. To point at a ripening pineapple and say, "That one will be ready by Easter." It was like saying, "I command nature. I am fruit royalty." And that's what terrifies you most, isn't it? You can buy status. You can fake culture. But you can't shortcut 2 years of compost coddling and soil whispering. That's why these pineries weren't just gardens. They were battlegrounds. There were pineapple rivalries so bitter they escalated into lawsuits over stolen manure recipes. One scandal involved a nobleman accused of sneaking into his cousin's glass house and swapping out an heirloom plant with a fake. Another whispered story claims a count's gardener was bribed to overwater the fruit before a royal inspection, causing it to collapse into a sugary heap mid-curtsy. You watch the Comte gaze at his pineapples like a doting father, and you wonder, is this love obsession or just competitive madness? As you step out of the glass house, your silk collar damp, and your shoes slightly steamed. You look back at Jules and his sunlit siblings. You've seen wealth before. But this is horticultural ego flaming at full throttle. And in a world where a pineapple can make or break your social standing, you suddenly feel very fruitless. Back in Paris, your social calendar is filling up again. Cards, calls, and carriages. But something's changed. Ever since your visit to the Comte de Valgrasse's steaming fruit nursery, you can't stop thinking about the cost of all this. Not just the personal toll of pretending to care about manure mixtures, but the actual financial toll. So tonight we talk about what a pineapple really cost, and how it transformed from a food into a status bomb with an explosive price tag. You wake up with an invitation resting on a silver tray, a midsummer banquet in honor of Madame Duvray's new salon. You know what that means. She's going to debut a pineapple. A fresh one. Rumor has it she ordered it straight from Martinique by name. This fruit has a paper trail. You prepare accordingly, stiff cravat, powdered face, empty stomach. Not for eating, of course. You just don't want anything distracting you from the social chessboard you're about to walk into. When you arrive, the pineapple is already the center of the room. A pedestal draped in embroidered linen surrounded by candles with flower petals strewn around it as if it were a saint's relic. It's not even sliced, and yet every guest is orbiting it like drunk astronomers. You overhear the whispers. "It cost 300 livres," someone hisses. "That's more than my carriage. They had to bribe the harbor master to get it past customs. I heard they lost 2 sailors bringing it over." All of this might be nonsense, but none of it matters. What matters is the aura. The pineapple is a star. To put it in perspective, 300 livres in the 18th century could pay for a year's rent on a modest Paris apartment. It could fund a servant's entire wedding. It could buy enough wine to throw a proper garden party. Instead, it's spent on one fruit that no one will eat. Historians still argue over the exact pricing of pineapples. Some records say 100 livres. Others 800 depending on the root, freshness, and season. But one thing's clear. The pineapple was a luxury item so absurdly expensive, it made silk look practical. And because of that, a strange black market emerged. People began faking prices to look richer. "Oh, I paid 500 for mine," they'd say casually, while the truth was closer to 80. Others overpaid on purpose, just so the number would get around. You start to wonder how Madame Duvray really acquired hers. Was it grown in her family's estate in Bordeaux, carefully shipped in straw, or did she rent it? Yes, renting was a thing, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But for now, all you know is that this fruit's mere presence is rewriting her status. But there's a flip side. When a pineapple costs that much, everything becomes a risk. You have to guard it like a crown jewel. You have to insure it unofficially with reputation. If it arrives, bruised too green or smells even vaguely fermented, your whole event is a flop. One noble family reportedly canceled a wedding reception when their pineapple shipment arrived late. Another, perhaps more foolish, served a slightly rotted pineapple to foreign guests, only to find themselves mocked in diplomatic letters for weeks. You remember the infamous case of the Vicomte de Carlet. He was planning a grand autumn ball. He had everything: fireworks, musicians, acrobats on stilts. But what he didn't have was a pineapple. So he sent a servant to Bordeaux with an empty crate, hoping the illusion alone would suffice. That crate sat under a velvet cloth all night, while guests murmured, speculated, and eventually discovered the ruse. The scandal was so devastating, he retreated to the countryside and was last heard of cultivating radishes. But here's the real kicker. Some nobles didn't even try to display a real pineapple. They'd use elaborate sugar sculptures made by confectioners who trained for years to mimic tropical fruit. Others hired painters to depict the pineapple on fine porcelain or tapestries, claiming it had already been enjoyed. And then there's you staring at Madame Duvray's fruit, unsure whether it's real rented or merely legend. You're standing near the punch bowl when a tipsy noble nudges you. 500 livres, she whispers with a wink. And I bet it's hollow. You choke politely on your sip hollow. Could someone have carved out the inside and replaced it with bread or wine? Would anyone dare? You glance around, everyone's watching the pineapple, but no one is moving closer. The host stands near it, arms casually folded, but you can sense the anxiety behind her smile. If anyone knocked it over, if it started to rot during the dinner toast. That's not just embarrassment, that's social ruin. There's something beautiful and bizarre about it all. You live in a world where a fruit can cost as much as a small house, where its purpose is not to feed but to flex, where one soft spot in the skin could undo a season of planning. And that's the tension you carry with you tonight. You leave the banquet smiling, nodding, complimenting the canapés. But in the back of your mind, you're already calculating what it would take to acquire one of these fruits yourself. Not for eating, just for standing there. Glowing, fragrant, unattainable. You've managed to navigate 3 pineapple-centered events without incident. But tonight, something is different. You're not just a guest, you've been gifted a pineapple. A real one. The kind that still glistens with dew from its cross-Atlantic journey. And you have a problem, because now you face the ultimate 18th century noble dilemma. Do you eat it? Or do you display it until it ferments into a soft, sagging symbol of your indecision? You carry it home in your lap like a royal infant. The carriage rocks gently as you stare at its jagged leaves and golden skin. It's heavier than you imagined, and it smells incredible, sweet, sharp, and utterly illegal feeling. You're already imagining the slicing sound the first bite. But wait, you can't just eat a pineapple. That's reckless, that's impulsive, that's practically peasant behavior. Back at your townhouse, your staff is buzzing. They've never seen one up close. Your maid curtsies to it. Your footman offers to polish it. Even your cook whispers, "Will we be consuming it, madame?" Like he's asking about forbidden magic. Here's the trouble. Eating a pineapple implies you've either grown one yourself or can afford to throw away hundreds of livres for a moment of flavor. That's noble tier flexing. But if you're seen eating it too soon before guests have admired it, before the gossip has fully spread, then you've wasted your social moment. And if you wait too long, the fruit might rot. Or worse, someone might whisper that you never had one at all, and the one they saw was a melon in costume. You place it delicately in your salon, under soft lighting near the harpsichord. You host 3 teas and a poetry reading, just to give it screen time. Everyone whispers. Everyone stares. One woman gasps audibly, but on the 4th morning you walk in and the scent has changed. It's ripening. Fast, that edge of honey-sour rot is creeping in, and you panic. This fruit has gone from asset to liability overnight. It's like holding a glittering grenade. That's when the old stories come back to you. Whispers you once dismissed as aristocratic folklore. About the noble who ate his pineapple at the wrong time and was cursed with indigestion and disgrace. About the lady who tried to serve one at a dinner and was accused of edible vulgarity. About the diplomat who bit into one and promptly lost his post in an exotic scandal involving mangoes. Historians still argue whether these tales are literal or metaphors, but they had the same effect. They made you fear the bite. And of course, there's the physiological mystery. Pineapples contain an enzyme called bromelain, which can make your mouth tingle or burn slightly when you eat too much. People in the 1700s didn't know what it was. All they knew was that some people ate the fruit and felt strange. One royal physician reportedly advised against eating pineapple unless it was thoroughly wine-soaked, accompanied by fresh mint, and consumed during a waxing moon. Others believed the fruit was too hot in temperament, a throwback to medieval humoral theory. Too much pineapple, they said, could inflame the blood, overheat the liver, stir unwanted passions. You know, the usual fruit-related doom. So, yes, you're afraid. Not just of indigestion, but of optics. If word gets out that you've eaten the pineapple and you didn't do it correctly with ceremony with an audience with the proper fork, you might be finished. You consult your cook. He suggests grilling it. You nearly faint. You call in your most diplomatic friend, the Comtesse d'Arlon, who once survived a 2-week pineapple scandal after mistaking a mango for one at court. She arrives in satin and silence. After circling the fruit for 5 minutes, she declares, "Serve it, but only to one person. Someone important. Someone dramatic. Let them eat it, and let it be seen." You choose your moment carefully. The next evening, you host a small supper. 9 guests, 4 candles, 1 pineapple. At precisely the midpoint of the meal, after the fish, before the pastries, you rise from your chair. A hush falls. You lift the pineapple. The air holds its breath. And then, in one elegant motion, you slice off the crown and begin to peel it like you're opening a royal letter. No one speaks. No one blinks. A single slice is passed to the Duc de Lagne. He accepts it like Holy Communion. He bites. He chews. He nods. "It is adequate," he murmurs. And that, dear listener, is peak nobility. By the end of the night, you've served 4 slices. The rest remains untouched perfectly, displayed under glass. It's no longer a pineapple, it's a legend. You did it. You ate the pineapple. Carefully, strategically, publicly, and tomorrow they'll all be talking about it. So, you've displayed the pineapple. You've eaten a slice just enough to get tongues wagging, but not enough to appear greedy. The whispers have begun. You're not sure if they're calling you bold or unhinged, but in this game the line is paper-thin and usually perfumed. The next morning, as you sit in your garden sketching fruit arrangements purely to calm your nerves, a footman delivers an embossed envelope. Inside, an invitation. The Duchess of Armenville requests the honor of your company this Thursday evening for a viewing. Not a concert, not a dinner, not even a dance. A pineapple viewing. You blink. Is this a joke? Is this performance art? Is this what society has become? Yes, it is. By now, you're well aware that actual ownership of a pineapple is far too expensive for most nobles, even those dripping in powdered sugar and gold thread. So what did the less flush, almost but not quite rich enough class do? They rented one. And this, dear listener, is where things get especially silly. See an entire side economy developed just to meet the insatiable demand for social pineapple validation. Wealthy merchants and ship captains, especially in port cities like Bordeaux-Nantes, or even London and Amsterdam, figured out they could make a tidy profit by leasing pineapples by the hour. That's right, pineapples had a rental market. You show up to Madame's soiree, and there it is. The fruit center stage, resting atop a silver charger surrounded by candied violets, and what appears to be a live canary in a ribbon. It's breathtaking, but it's not hers. It was delivered in a velvet-lined case earlier that day, and if no one bumps it or drops it in the punch, it will return to the vendor by dawn to be wiped down and rented again to someone else by Saturday. 1 pineapple. Dozens of appearances. Some were even passed around entire neighborhoods. An aristocratic share fruit, if you will. Now imagine the stress. You're renting something worth hundreds of livres. You're not allowed to damage it, eat it, refrigerate it, or touch it with anything warmer than a polite glance. And heaven help you if it starts to rot while in your possession. That would be like dropping the crown jewels in a muddy puddle and blaming the humidity. You've heard stories, everyone has. One noble dropped his rented pineapple. It rolled under the buffet table and was found 2 hours later by a tipsy abbé trying to pet it like a small dog. The fruit was dented. The host was fined. The rental agent sent a very stern letter. Historians still argue whether pineapple rental contracts were written or verbal, but some records suggest there were fruit brokers in cities like Paris who specialized in luxury produce, offering catalogs of fruit types, ripeness levels, and delivery methods. Want a green one to imply your estate grows them early? Done. Want one with a little over-ripeness for a sensual dessert display? Also doable. Want one that's been waxed to last an extra week without showing signs of spoilage? There's a pineapple for that. But of course, there were pineapple scams too. Some fruit brokers reused wax models, passing them off as fresh for weeks. Others sold counterfeit fruit wrapped in banana leaves to unsuspecting nobles who wouldn't dare question anything tropical for fear of seeming provincial. And then came the Great Swap incident of 1784. At a dual-hosted gala, 2 neighboring nobles unknowingly rented the same pineapple. Both had planned to unveil it at precisely 9 p.m. for dramatic effect. One in the music room, one in the conservatory. But due to a scheduling mix-up and one very overworked courier, the same fruit ended up displayed in both rooms on opposite ends of the same house. A guest noticed. The scandal lasted months. Newspaper caricatures were drawn. One satire depicted the fruit wearing spectacles and a cape sneaking from room to room. The hostesses never spoke again. That's the danger of a borrowed pineapple. It comes with built-in humiliation risk. You, on the other hand, still have your slightly shriveling fruit from the night before. Real, uneaten yours. You're tempted to rent it out just for a weekend. Let someone else enjoy the stress. You picture your pineapple traveling Paris in a little coach, stopping at soirée, posing for portraits, silently judging, and then it hits you. There were pineapple handlers. Some nobles were so paranoid about their fruit being stolen, bruised, or otherwise degraded during delivery, that they sent trusted servants, sometimes even family members, to accompany the pineapple at all times. Like a spiky little royal. You once met a man at a gallery who introduced himself as Pierre, steward of pineapples. You thought it was a joke. It wasn't. There's something soothingly absurd about it all. The idea that an entire class of humans dressed in silk and powdered to perfection spent their fortunes managing a fruit they didn't even intend to eat. You glance at your own pineapple one last time. It's starting to collapse gently at the base. Still fragrant. Still golden. Still somehow triumphant. And you think maybe renting it isn't such a bad idea if you do it quickly, if you wrap it in velvet, if you choose the right party. Or maybe, just maybe, you let it rot and display that. It's a few days later, and your pineapple has now softened into what could politely be described as a romantic decline. Still fragrant, still luminous, but with a melancholy lean, as if it knows its moment has passed. You consider holding a small vigil, maybe even composing a poem, something about lost fruit and fleeting status, but before you can descend too far into pineapple grief, you're summoned to a diplomatic supper hosted by none other than the Comte de Fleury, one of the slipperiest political minds at court. And that's when you remember, pineapples aren't just for show, they're for strategy. Tonight, the fruit will be used for politics. You arrive at the Comte's salon, and you can already feel the tension humming beneath the polished marble floor. Candles flicker in candelabras shaped like lilies. There's far too much perfume in the air. Everyone's overcompensating, and there, placed with surgical precision in the center of the room, is a pineapple, not overly ripe, not too green. Its crown is fluffed, its surface polished, and beneath it, resting on the base of the stand, is a tiny velvet flag. You raise an eyebrow. That's the Dutch flag. Interesting. See, pineapples didn't just come from anywhere. In France, much of the pineapple supply was funneled from French Caribbean colonies, places like Saint-Domingue and Martinique. But occasionally, through a web of backdoor deals, smuggling routes, and overly chatty merchants, some nobles got their pineapples from Dutch traders. This was frowned upon. Not because the Dutch pineapples were inferior, they often weren't, but because France and the Netherlands weren't exactly best friends. Accepting, or worse, celebrating a Dutch pineapple at court could imply diplomatic sympathies, or commercial alliances, or treason. It depends who's watching. Historians still argue how deep these pineapple politics ran, but there's enough correspondence and court gossip to suggest that at least some nobles weaponized fruit as a message. Tonight, that's what the Comte is doing. The pineapple is a quiet insult. His rival, the Marquis de Sorel, is a known supporter of tighter trade restrictions on Dutch imports. By displaying a perfect Dutch-grown pineapple in a room full of ambassadors and bureaucrats, the Comte is saying, I have access, I have allies, and I don't care about your little policies. You take a long sip of wine and try not to laugh. It's astonishing how much can be said without saying anything just by choosing the right fruit. Later in the evening, you overhear a conversation between two courtiers debating whether the pineapple is Dutch or merely Dutch-presented one. Insists that the shipping straw used in the crate is uniquely patterned. The other claims the leaves are cut more squarely, which is apparently a Dutch habit. You find this both ridiculous and fascinating. You're also beginning to suspect that no one here really knows anything about pineapples except how to use them as weapons. The Comte approaches you holding a small plate of candied figs. Enjoying the room, he asks casually, motioning toward the fruit. You nod. It's bold. He smiles, just enough to confirm that boldness was the point. It's not the sweetness of the pineapple that matters. He says softly, it's who notices that you have one. Later, the Marquis de Sorel arrives fashionably late. He greets the room with studied warmth, then freezes ever so slightly when he sees the pineapple. He doesn't say a word, but you notice him turn to his valet and whisper something before heading to the punch table. You can feel the energy shift. The air becomes sharper, colder. Pineapple diplomacy has landed. This might seem ridiculous, but consider the context. These were people who operated in a system where every nod, every glove color, every lace ruffle meant something. In a world obsessed with codes and symbols, a pineapple visibly foreign, wildly expensive, loaded with colonial baggage was a grenade in fruit's clothing. And it wasn't just France. Across Europe, pineapples played strange diplomatic roles. British envoys sent pineapples as gifts to Swedish queens. Spanish governors hosted fruit banquets to woo visiting officials. There's even a record of a Prussian minister refusing a pineapple dessert out of fear it was a political trap. Did he believe it was poisoned? Maybe, but more likely he feared what accepting it implied, that he was pliable. Open, sweetened. You begin to understand that pineapples weren't feared just because of cost or cultural mystique. They were feared because they spoke in silence, in scent, in skin. You wander out to the balcony, the summer air thick with wine and unspoken insult. The stars are out. The violinist inside has switched to a slower tune. Below, a servant delivers a wooden crate to the back door. You catch a glimpse of straw and leaves. Another pineapple. Let the diplomacy continue. The next afternoon, you sit slouched in your favorite salon chair, still mentally replaying the Comte's pineapple stunt from the night before. You're exhausted, not from dancing or drinking, but from decoding fruit-based politics like some overly perfumed cryptologist. But just as you start to relax, your cook bursts in with panic on his face. It's arrived early, he gasps. You sit up alarmed. What has? He doesn't need to answer. You hear the clatter of wheels in the entryway, the shuffle of too many feet, and the unmistakable scent of sweet tropical urgency drifting through the air. Another pineapple. Apparently, the one you ordered as a joke weeks ago has finally arrived. From the colonies, no less. And it's massive. There's only one problem: you weren't planning a dinner party. And yet somehow one is now expected. The staff is already preparing. Your butler is selecting candles. Your maid is ironing tablecloths. Someone's polishing a fish fork. It's as if the house itself understands that when a pineapple arrives, you must show it off. And this is where things get especially absurd, because now you are the host, and the pineapple is your burden. And nothing causes more chaos in a noble kitchen than the arrival of a pineapple. As you head downstairs to check on preparations, you hear shouting. Pots are banging. Flour is flying. A junior cook is crying. What's going on, you ask warily. The head chef looks up from a stained parchment recipe. I don't know what to do with it, he says, looking genuinely distressed. It's not for salad, it's not for soup, and it doesn't pair with partridge. It's wrong. You sigh. Here we go. In 18th century French kitchens, especially those serving aristocrats, every dish had a place. There were rules, seasons, pairings, hierarchies. You couldn't just slap a tropical fruit next to a roast duck and call it a night. And pineapples. They weren't part of traditional cuisine. They were alien, unruly. They didn't behave like pears. They didn't stew like apples. And worst of all, they refused to be predictable. Some chefs baked them whole disaster. Some tried mashing them into sauces. Weird. One bold soul attempted a pineapple soufflé, which exploded in the oven and almost burned down an entire wing of a country estate. Historians still argue about whether any authentic pineapple dish from this period was actually good, or if they were just tolerated because of the fruit's elite status. But one thing is certain: no one agreed on how to cook the thing. Even serving it raw was controversial. Do you slice it into rings? Do you cube it? Do you peel it first? Do you serve it? cold room temperature, on gold-rimmed plates, on crystal dishes with herbs with cream. One poor duchess reportedly served hers alongside trout, and the resulting flavor clash was described in her diary as punishable by exile. And so your kitchen descends into panic. The chef tries boiling a slice with cloves, too sweet, then grilling it, too charred, then flambeing it, which nearly ignites the butler's wig. You meanwhile are upstairs with a quill and parchment sketching possible centerpiece designs that don't look like a fruit funeral. Your guests are arriving soon, and you have nothing to serve but tension and a growing aroma of burnt sugar. Eventually, your cook returns sweat dripping from his temple. "I've decided," he says solemnly. "We will not serve it." You blink what? He points dramatically toward the hall. "We will place it on the buffet under glass. It will glisten. It will perfume the room, but no knife shall touch it." You exhale. Honestly, it's a relief. But as the evening begins and the guests arrive, laughing, bowing, dropping all the latest pineapple gossip, you realize something crucial. Even not serving the pineapple is a culinary decision, a deliberate act of restraint. And in some circles, restraint is the ultimate sophistication. "Ah," says a baroness, "I do admire your discipline. Everyone's slicing theirs these days." You nod, as if that was your plan all along. Later, in the candlelight, one guest leans in and asks, "What is it like?" "The taste." And you realize most of these people still haven't actually eaten a pineapple. They've heard about them, seen them, smelled them, but the real flavor that's reserved for the daring or the desperate. And so you describe it, slowly, poetically. It's like honey soaked in sunlight. You whisper with a sting, like biting into a smile that bites back. The room sighs. No one asks to try it. They wouldn't dare. And in that moment, as the music drifts from the harpsichord, and your pineapple stands proud under its glass dome like a royal relic, you realize something else. Your dinner was a success. Not because of the food, not because of the guest list, but because of how you handled the fruit. You didn't cook it. You didn't serve it. You curated it. And in the kitchen, your cook finally sits down, pours himself a glass of wine, and mutters, "God, save us from exotic fruit." You wake up the next morning to find your drawing room still faintly perfumed with pineapple. The scent lingers in the velvet drapes and the upholstery like a ghost of last night's social success. You sit with your coffee, basking in the soft afterglow of a well-received fruit until your butler enters with an anxious expression and a silver tray. On it a note, sealed in green wax. You open it carefully. It's from the Marquise de Bellandière. "Dear friend, I must warn you, there are whispers, concerns. The fruit was too fresh. Jealously yours. B." You blink too fresh, and just like that, the warm afterglow is gone, replaced with that old familiar tingle of dread. Because now you've encountered a new layer of pineapple paranoia, the fear of pineapple poisoning. Yes, believe it or not, in 18th century France, some nobles already obsessed with optics, scent, and symbolism believed pineapples could be dangerous, not in the allergic reaction kind of way, in the mysterious, almost magical kind of way. You remember the whispers from Versailles that one gentleman's tongue blistered after eating an underripe slice, that a duchess fainted dead away after nibbling pineapple custard in summer heat, that a bishop once claimed the fruit gave him visions of the tropics, whatever that means. Historians still argue whether these stories were grounded in real reactions or just social hysteria. After all, as we mentioned before, pineapples contain bromelain, a real enzyme that can break down proteins and cause mouth irritation in some people. But science didn't quite have a name for it back then, so people invented other explanations. There were whole pamphlets warning against eating pineapple when pregnant, when melancholic, or when Mercury was retrograde. Some said eating it hot was the issue. Others claimed the fruit should only be consumed cold and damp, preferably in moonlight. There was even a short-lived craze for pineapple neutralizers syrups or powders served before the fruit to balance its tropical energy. One apothecary claimed his version was blessed with lemon tears and cooled in silver basins. Another swore by crushed mint leaves boiled in rainwater collected on Tuesdays. But here's the truly wild part. Some nobles believed pineapples could be cursed, not in the fairy tale sense, more in the subtle sabotage way. You've heard the rumors that rival families would gift a pineapple to someone they wished to humiliate. If the fruit looked too perfect, unattainably golden, unnaturally symmetrical, it was said to be either fake, smuggled, or tampered with. One theory involved injecting the core with foreign oils that caused digestive upset. Another whispered that pineapples were occasionally stored near arsenic to absorb a weakness of health. Most of this was nonsense. Of course it was, but in a society built on fear of embarrassment, believing the nonsense was safer than ignoring it. You think back to your own dinner. Was your pineapple too fresh, too symmetrical, too glossy? Did someone think you were showing off too hard? You start to spiral. Should you have chosen a slightly bruised one? Should you have displayed it in a more humble room? Should you have hosted a smaller crowd, offered simpler wine? That's the thing about social paranoia. It seeps in like pineapple juice on a silk napkin. Impossible to remove, strangely, sticky, slightly sweet. You're pulled from your thoughts by a knock at the door. It's the cook again. "Madame," he says nervously, "your gardener is unwell." You raise an eyebrow. Unwell? How? The cook fidgets. He claims he touched the pineapple's leaves, and now his hand burns. You stare at him. He also says he's having tropical dreams. You sigh. It begins again. You visit the gardener, who is lying dramatically beneath a parasol in the potting shed, waving a sprig of rosemary over his chest and muttering something about Caribbean sunsets. To his credit, his hand is a bit red, possibly scratched, possibly from trying to harvest artichokes with his gloves off. But the story has already taken flight. By lunch, your housekeeper insists the pineapple was too sharp in aura. By evening, your footman is afraid to dust the glass dome it sat under in case it activates the poison oils. And you're exhausted. You consider tossing the whole thing out the window. But what if the neighbors see? Instead, you wrap it in muslin and quietly send it away. Destination undisclosed. It disappears like a diplomat after a failed treaty with no comment and a faint smell of citrus. Later that night, you pour yourself a generous glass of port and stare into the fire. You begin to understand something fundamental. The fear of the pineapple isn't about the fruit. It's about control. Because no matter how carefully you plan, how gracefully you host, how precisely you polish the fruit's crown, there's always the chance that it turns on you, that it bruises, that it rots, that it sparks rumors, that it makes someone's gardener mildly itchy and causes a scandal. And so, the noble's fear of pineapple is really a fear of unpredictability, of slipping, of being seen as excessive or careless or too hungry. And in that way, maybe the pineapple isn't cursed. Maybe it's just honest. 3 weeks pass. The pineapple is gone, carried off by a discreet servant to who knows where, possibly buried in a field under moonlight, like some tropical martyr. Your household is quiet again. The air smells like furniture polish and mild regret. Life is briefly back to normal, but in Paris, nothing stays calm for long. Especially when fruit is involved. It begins with a murmur. You're at a modest poetry reading. Someone is reciting verses about melancholy shadows and forgotten birds when a countess leans in and whispers, "Did you hear about the incident at the opera?" You haven't. She fans herself and smirks, a pineapple gift. Completely misread. Ended in a duel. And just like that, you realize we need to talk about pineapple gifts. Because in 18th century France, gifting a pineapple was not a simple gesture. It wasn't like handing over a pie or a bottle of wine. No. Gifting a pineapple was loaded with meaning, status, suggestion, and danger. Sometimes it was romantic. A secret admirer might send a pineapple to declare not only affection, but financial seriousness. After all, nothing says I adore you like a fruit that costs more than an entire horse. Other times it was a favor, a political olive branch wrapped in rind. A duchess might send one to a minister's wife in hopes of a timely whisper. A banker might deliver one to a noble whose debts were getting loud. But most dangerously, a pineapple could also be an insult. Too ripe. You're calling someone gaudy. Too green. You're implying they're underdeveloped, slightly bruised. Here, enjoy this damaged luxury, it suits you. And if the pineapple was fake, oh dear, that was tantamount to slapping someone with a silk glove dipped in sarcasm. Historians still argue about the infamous opera incident. What is known is this: a certain noblewoman referred to in the gossip sheets as Madame X presented a pineapple to a rising baritone singer after a particularly emotional aria, publicly, lavishly, in full view of her husband. The gesture might have been generous or flirtatious or strategic. No one agrees, but the next morning the singer received a challenge from someone. No one would confirm who. The duel was scheduled. No one died, but one man left with a bruised ego and a mild flesh wound in the thigh. The pineapple was later found in the wings of the opera house, split in half and discarded like a stage prop that forgot its lines. And that's the risk of gifting. Pineapples. Intentions are slippery. You remember the first time someone offered you one. It was 2 seasons ago. A viscount's nephew, charming, overconfident, not particularly solvent, sent one to your townhouse with a note. May your table be as sweet as your conversation. Your cook swooned. Your friends speculated. Your aunt warned you that accepting it might signal interest. You left it outside overnight, and a raccoon made off with half of it. Problem solved. But now you wonder, was it a compliment? A bribe? A trap? You begin to recall more stories. The Marquise de Rouen received 2 pineapples in the same week from 2 rival suitors. She hosted a luncheon and made a fruit salad out of both bold, iconic, dangerous. One of them never spoke to her again. The other proposed within a month. Another tale tells of a count who sent a pineapple to a bishop to thank him for officiating a wedding. The bishop took offense, claiming the gesture was profane, fruit idolatry. He responded by sending back a Bible and a firm letter. The count kept the Bible but used it as a bookend. The pineapple went on to star in 3 banquets and a still life. Gifting a pineapple, you realize is like gifting a rumor. It never stays still. It travels, morphs, grows teeth, and that's the beauty and the curse of it, because even when intentions are pure, the fruit says more than you mean. You start to toy with the idea of sending one yourself. Maybe to the Comte de Fleury as a quiet nod to his Dutch display, or to the Baroness who always compliments your taste in wallpaper with just enough edge to make it sound like an accusation. But then you stop, because what if they misread it? What if the fruit is too golden? What if the leaves arrive slightly wilted? What if it bruises in the coach and they think you're insulting their hygiene? You breathe deeply. The pineapple has power. It demands precision, and you are not quite ready to wield it again. Later that night, as the candlelight flickers and the room settles into soft velvet hush, you picture a pineapple traveling Paris by candlelight, hopping from salon to salon, always saying something, even when no one is listening. It's just a fruit, and yet it could start a scandal, spark a duel, or end a friendship. You pour yourself a cordial and raise it toward the ghost of that opera fruit. To misunderstood gifts, you whisper, and sip. By now, you've seen the pineapple in nearly every scenario. Centerpieces, rentals, garden, shrines, diplomatic barbs, and high-stakes dessert tables. But tonight, we slip into the part of the chateau the lords and ladies pretend not to know exists, the back corridors, the staff halls, because if you want to know what really happened with these pineapples, the gossip, the sabotage, the curses, you need to follow the ones who clean up after the scandal. Tonight, you descend the servants' stairs, flickering lantern in hand. You nod to the butler. You pass the kitchen. You pause by the pantry, where rumor has it a footman once accidentally dropped a rented pineapple and tried to glue it back together with marmalade. And there beyond the linen closets and stew pots is the world of pineapple servant gossip. You've always suspected it existed, and now you're hearing it firsthand. The housemaid Elise is quietly slicing apples for compote while chatting with the scullery boy, who nods solemnly and mutters. She never even sliced it, just left it there to rot while the parrot stared at it. You pretend not to listen, but you're absolutely listening. Turns out, below stairs, the pineapple is a living myth. Every time a noble parades one in front of guests, the staff is watching with a mixture of awe, annoyance, and you have no idea what we went through to make that stupid fruit look casual. Because here's the thing. The more effortless a noble's pineapple display, the more effort it actually required behind the scenes. You learn that some households had entire protocols polish the leaves with oil, rotate the fruit every 4 hours to avoid flat spots, place tiny cinnamon sachets nearby to mask early rot. One household even trained a servant to discreetly spritz it with rose water to keep its scent mysteriously fresh. But it wasn't just maintenance. It was survival. The pineapple could cause friction below stairs like nothing else. The gardener thought he deserved credit if it was grown on site. The cook wanted glory if it arrived edible. The butler, who had to present it, bore the risk of tripping and launching it into a duchess's lap. One wrong move, and your job could be on the chopping block before the fruit. You remember the tale of Luke the valet, who accidentally set a pineapple down in the wrong direction, crown facing away from guests. That's it. That's all he did. The mistress said it looked aloof. He was reassigned to horse duty in winter. Or the maid at a rival estate who accidentally laughed when a noble tried to eat the decorative centerpiece pineapple. Her fate: immediate dismissal. Later, it's said she opened a tavern called La Tête de l'Ananas and served spiced pineapple tarts just to spite the whole affair. Historians still argue about the role of staff in pineapple theatrics. There are fragments of letters from housekeepers giving pineapple care instructions that rival modern infant manuals. One simply reads, "Turn it gently each dusk." Keep away from cats. But the best stories never made it to paper. They lived in whispers, in kitchens, in wine cellars. Like the time a chambermaid claimed a pineapple had spoken to her in a dream, and she started sleeping with a wax one under her pillow. Or the time a footman claimed he could tell a pineapple's colony of origin just by licking it. He was wrong. Often, but still proudly licked. You begin to understand that for the servants the pineapple wasn't a symbol of luxury. It was a symbol of noble absurdity. A perfect, spiky metaphor for everything ridiculous about the elite world. Expensive, unpredictable high pressure, and fundamentally inedible. But sometimes, just sometimes, staff got their moment. There's a legendary tale whispered across estates of a grand dinner where the host dropped dead before dessert. The pineapple centerpiece untouched sat in lonely splendor, while guests shuffled out in mourning. The next morning, the cook quietly served the staff grilled pineapple on toast. They called it justice. And there's the ongoing legend of the wandering pineapple, a particularly realistic wax replica that was passed from estate to estate by the servants used to mock the noble's obsession. Each household would sneak it into a rival's drawing room, photograph it, sketch it, and leave behind cryptic notes like, "She's back. Be afraid. You don't know if the wandering pineapple still exists." Some say it melted in a summer heat wave. Others believe it's hidden in the cellar of a ruined chateau, quietly judging. As you return upstairs, the scent of stew rising to meet your powdered sleeves, you realize something that makes you chuckle. The pineapple may be a symbol of elite grandeur up above, but down here, it's the punchline, the joke, the mystery, the challenge. And somehow that makes it all the more powerful, because when fruit causes this much drama across all levels of society, you know you're dealing with more than just fruit. You're dealing with a legend. The next morning, Paris is buzzing with a new whisper. The king has asked for one. You hear it first from your footman, who overheard it from a laundress, who heard it from a palace courier, who probably wasn't supposed to say anything. But by the time you finish your second cup of coffee, it's confirmed. Louis XV wants a pineapple, and not just any pineapple, he wants a Versailles grown one. Naturally, you sit very still processing what this means. For the royal household, for the glass houses at the Trianon, and perhaps most importantly, for your reputation if your pineapple was even slightly better than his. It's a high-stakes moment, because when the king gets curious about a trend, especially a ridiculous one, it stops being a social experiment and becomes a national obsession. Historians still argue whether Louis XV actually liked pineapples or just enjoyed the spectacle. What is certain, however, is that he liked owning what others couldn't. He once demanded a dozen ostrich feathers after seeing one in a foreign diplomat's hat. He asked for a mechanical singing bird after watching one chirp in a duchess's boudoir. And now it's the pineapple. Word spreads quickly. Gardeners are summoned. Greenhouses are fired up. Coal deliveries spike. One of the queen's maids claims her eyebrows singed off while adjusting the pineapple heater's damper. Sacrifices are being made. You happen to know the gardener in charge of the royal pinery, Monsieur Burrell, a man with hands like bark and patience like stone. You once shared a carriage with him during a storm, and made the mistake of asking if pineapples required much tending. He didn't speak to you for the rest of the ride. Now he is the most important man in the palace. You hear that he's begun speaking to the fruit. Not metaphorically out loud. Full conversations, encouragements, gentle threats. You will ripen by Easter. He was overheard whispering, "You will not embarrass me." A royal pineapple is unlike any other. It can't just look good, it must be perfect. Symmetrical, golden, spiky, fragrant. It must survive being carted across cobbled roads and carried through marbled halls, and still look like the physical embodiment of France's horticultural superiority. The anxiety is so great, someone proposes painting a backup. A royal fruit forgery. This is of course rejected, but not immediately, which says a lot. Meanwhile, the royal cooks are in a frenzy. They need to plan a tasting for the king, but no one agrees on the method. Should it be sliced thin and served with honey, roasted with cloves mashed into a delicate puree, and served in a chilled silver spoon held by a page boy with trembling hands? One cook insists the king must eat it raw, untouched in its purest form. Another argues for a custard. A third proposes freezing it as a demonstration of French modernity. He is promptly slapped with a ladle. As the days pass, the court holds its collective breath. Rumors fly. The fruit is under guard. The fruit is being read poetry. The fruit has its own footman. Someone claims the king peeked in early to sniff it and was brought to tears. "It smells like sunlit gold," he allegedly said. You doubt it. But it's a good quote. Finally, the day arrives. The court assembles. Courtiers shift in embroidered silence. The queen fans herself. The pineapple sits on a silver plinth flanked by lilies as music from the royal quartet trickles through the room. The king enters. Everyone bows. He approaches the pineapple like a priest at the altar. No one breathes. A servant slices it. A perfect arc. A perfect scent. The slice is placed on a tiny gold-rimmed plate. It is offered to the king. He takes a bite. He chews. He swallows. He nods. And just like that, it's done. He liked it. He liked it. No dramatic speech. No thunderous applause. Just that nod. But you know what that means. It means everything. Because from this moment on, pineapple fever is officially state-sanctioned. The floodgates open. Estates across France rush to build orangeries. Coal supplies skyrocket. Pineapple-themed fans, porcelain, and even wigs are spotted within the week. Yes, someone wears a pineapple-inspired wig. It's tall, it's pointy, it's absurd. There's a run on imported fruit from the colonies. Shipments are redirected. Merchants inflate prices overnight. One bold trader paints his ship's figurehead to look like a pineapple, naming it Le Roi Sucré. You begin to hear stories of nobles skipping dinner to afford fruit, of dances postponed due to pineapple delivery delays, of couples naming their children ananas in tribute to the trend. It's beautiful and ridiculous, and very, very French. You sit by your window that night, watching the candlelight flicker across your mantel, where a simple pineapple drawing now hangs in a gold frame. A memory. A warning. The king tasted the fruit, and now everyone's hungry. Now that the king has tasted the fruit, literally everything changes. The whispers become roars. The trend explodes. Every noble household with ambition and at least one stretch of sun-drenched dirt is now trying to grow import, borrow rent, or manifest a pineapple. But here's where things get really spicy, because where there is fruit, there are colonies, and where there are colonies, there's tension. Tonight, we peel back the silk curtain and look toward the tropical heat. The humid, humming lands across the ocean that supplied France with sugar coffee and, yes, pineapples. You already know the pineapples were grown in places like Saint-Domingue, present-day Haiti, Martinique, Guadeloupe, all lush Caribbean territories under French control. From the powdered salons of Paris, these islands seemed exotic, romantic, impossibly fertile. But the reality was different. Much of that lush bounty was extracted through brutal back-breaking labor performed by enslaved Africans under colonial rule. While nobles in France debated centerpiece placement and dessert pairings, people thousands of miles away were digging, watering, harvesting. In silence, under sun, under force. You won't hear this in polite drawing-room conversation. But the staff knew, the merchants knew, and the more thoughtful nobles, often those with connections to shipping, definitely knew. You remember being at a masquerade where a pineapple was being passed around the room like a jewel. One gentleman, half drunk and half serious, muttered, "You can taste the whips, can't you?" No one laughed. The music resumed. The fruit was forgotten, but the comment stuck. Historians still debate how widely this knowledge circulated. Was it willful ignorance, convenient detachment, or simply the social etiquette of the day to enjoy the fruit but never ask who planted it? Even stranger, there were nobles who took pride in having colonial pineapples as opposed to locally grown ones. They'd drop it into conversation casually. Oh yes, ours came from Cap Français, picked in January, tasted of thunder, as if that thunder didn't come from storm clouds and cannons. Meanwhile, ships arriving in Bordeaux and Nantes with crates of pineapples carried more than just fruit. They brought news, rebellions, unrest, disease. Pineapple crates were often unloaded alongside letters from plantation owners begging for more troops, more supplies, or more horrifyingly, more people. You recall a dinner party where a noblewoman, clearly eager to show off, declared, "I have a cousin in Saint-Domingue. He has entire rows of pineapples." The room applauded politely, but your friend leaned in and whispered, "And does he write with red ink?" It was a quiet kind of rebellion. These sideways comments, the subtle resistance. Because even amid all the satin and silliness, there were some who saw. And then there were the teeth. Yes, teeth. One of the strangest side effects of pineapple consumption in the colonies was dental. The high acidity of frequent pineapple eating, especially among the overseers who took the ripest fruit for themselves, began to erode enamel plantation owners with blackened or cracked teeth, became oddly common, leading to an unofficial nickname, tropical mouth. It wasn't spoken of often in France. But when one particularly rich planter arrived in Paris for a royal audience and flashed a pineapple-damaged smile, a pamphlet circulated the next week called "When the Fruit Fights Back." It was satire, but biting, no pun intended. Even more ironic. Many of the nobles who pretended to grow pineapples locally were in fact importing them secretly through colonial channels, then claiming the greenhouse credit. It was deception layered over injustice served on a platter. But not all colonial interactions were so grand or political. Some were domestic. You remember a quiet afternoon at a friend's estate. Her butler, a man originally from Martinique, offered you a slice of pineapple with a very specific look. "It is not just fruit," he said softly. "It is return." You nodded, though you didn't fully understand. Later, you learned he'd once worked on a pineapple plantation, first as a child laborer, then as a steward. Somehow, he'd made his way to France. And now he handled the fruit as if it were an old enemy, or a test, or a memory. That night you couldn't sleep, because for all the laughter and lace, the truth lingers. The pineapple may be the most glamorous symbol of noble excess, but it's also the quietest reminder of the people who never got to sit at the table. And so, when you next see one at a banquet, glowing under crystal chandeliers nestled in gold filigree, you look at it differently. You don't fawn. You don't marvel. You just nod, like someone who understands where it came from. The year is 1788, and you can feel it in the air thicker than perfume, heavier than silk. Something's changing. The salons feel colder. The powdered faces seem more nervous. Even the violins are playing a bit too fast. And then it happens. A woman at a garden party throws her pineapple into the hedge. You see it with your own eyes. She's a minor noble, fashionable, frilled, loud when drunk. She takes one look at the centerpiece, scowls, and flings it like a croquet ball into the bushes. Enough, she snaps, brushing her hands. We are not ruled by fruit. You nearly choke on your chilled liqueur, but no one laughs. No one gasps. A few people glance around awkwardly. One man mutters, "She's not wrong." The air goes still. Then, almost like nothing happened, the conversation shifts to grain prices, bread, shortages, a pamphlet someone read about, rights. You sit very still, because this right here is the beginning of the pineapple's fall from grace. It doesn't happen all at once. No one sends an official memo saying fruit is canceled. But you begin to notice the signs. Pineapples are no longer on every table. They're missing from a few parties. A hostess nervously says, "We thought something simpler would be appropriate." She serves pears, and this shift, this quiet fruit rebellion, coincides with something far louder, the French Revolution. As the economy buckles and protests rise, symbols of excess begin to stink like last month's seafood course. And nothing screams excess like a fruit that costs more than a year's rent, and must be rotated hourly by a powdered footman in silk gloves. Suddenly, the pineapple isn't just a curiosity. It's an accusation. Look at the nobles. The people say, spending fortunes on fruit while we chew bark and beg for bread. Pamphlets circulate with caricatures of nobles, with pineapples for heads round gold, ridiculous. The fruit becomes a punchline, a target. And it's not just the pamphlets. The streets are changing. That man with the pineapple figurehead on his merchant ship. He's painting it over. That lady with the pineapple-inspired wig. She's gone back to buns. That couple who named their daughter Ananas. She's going by Annette now. Even in your own circles, the topic becomes taboo. A friend nervously removes a pineapple painting from her breakfast room. Another sends hers back to Martinique, claiming it never quite ripened properly. Historians still debate whether the fall of the pineapple was a cause or a symptom, but it's clear the revolution made it unfashionable to be flamboyant. And pineapples, bless them, are the definition of flamboyant. Loud, fragrant, colonial royal. Dangerous. You remember the Comte de Fleury, the fruit diplomat, the Dutch import braggart. You hear he tried to host a private pineapple supper in 1790. 12 guests. No politics, just nostalgia. It did not go well. The story goes that one of the guests, young radical, fueled by wine, and Rousseau stood up mid-course and shouted, "I would sooner guillotine a fruit than my neighbor." He sliced the pineapple in half with his butter knife. The rest of the meal went silent. The Comte moved to Vienna shortly thereafter, and so pineapples quietly disappear from Paris. They retreat to paintings, to porcelain, to gardens, no longer funded, to journals and memories. No one burns them or bans them. They just stop showing up. You keep yours hidden. Not that you have a fresh one. It's been months since a ship last docked with fruit aboard, but your old centerpiece sits in a velvet-lined box in the attic, wrapped in muslin, carefully positioned. You open it sometimes. Look at it. Smell the faint ghost of its perfume. Wonder if it misses the applause. Then you close the box, because out there in the streets people are starving. And in here, in your candlelit rooms, fruit is no longer neutral. The revolution is not just about heads and thrones. It's about symbols. And for nearly half a century, the pineapple was the ultimate edible crown. Now it's just an awkward memory. One evening, you walk through the market and spot a fruit seller with a half-rotten pineapple in his cart. No fanfare. No silver tray. Just sitting between potatoes and onions. Its leaves wilting, its skin bruised. You ask him where he got it. He shrugs. It came with the rum. I don't know what to do with it. It smells strange. You buy it anyway. You bring it home. You set it gently on your kitchen table, and you eat it. All of it. Just you, the silence, and the soft, tangy sting of a fruit that once ruled your world. It's now 1793, and the pineapple, once the crown jewel of France's powdered elite, sits forgotten, dethroned, and quietly decomposing in 100 abandoned orangeries across the countryside. Versailles is shuttered. The salons are silent. The wigs are gone, and the guillotine, swift and unblinking, hums in the square like a metronome for the end of an era. But you somehow are still here. Not rich, not ruined, just in between. A survivor of lace and fruit and carefully worded invitations. You live in a modest townhouse now, windows shuttered against the wind and eyes of passing patrols. You've replaced the harpsichord with a squeaky armchair. Your hair is no longer powdered. Your library is a bit dusty. But you still remember. And tonight you go up into the attic one last time. The old velvet box waits in its corner. You brush off the dust. Open it. Inside is the porcelain pineapple centerpiece you had commissioned during the height of your fruit fame. You'd used it once, maybe twice before, hiding it away. When the mood shifted, and the aristocracy turned from admired to endangered, the porcelain still gleams faintly. The fruit's shape still noble. Its smile still smug. But now it feels like a ghost, because by now the pineapple means something entirely different. No longer a luxury, not even an insult. Now it's a relic from a time when status was spiky, and social hierarchies could be spun from golden fruit and gossip. Historians looking back will call it pineapple mania, as if it were just a trend. A silly diversion. A rich person's whim. But you know better. You lived it. You saw reputations rise and fall on a crate of Caribbean cargo. You saw nobles duel over misinterpreted fruit. You saw servants whisper and peasants roll their eyes. You saw a king nod once and change the flavor of an entire empire. And you saw the whole thing rot. There's a peculiar peace in it now, though. a quiet understanding that nothing stays ripe forever. Not fruit, not fashion, not power. You smile and carefully lift the porcelain fruit from its resting place. It's lighter than you remember, no longer burdened by the weight of expectation or extravagance. You carry it downstairs and place it on your mantel, not as a display of wealth, not to impress visitors, but simply to remember. Not everyone still alive dares to, but you do. Outside, you hear footsteps. The world is still dangerous, still uncertain. But for a moment, within these quiet walls, all is calm, and the pineapple just sits, silent, elegant. Finally, free from judgment, you dim the lamps, and you rest. Let your breath slow now. The salons are quiet. The candles have burned low. The powdered guests, the frantic cooks, the velvet-clad gardeners. They've all faded into sleep just like the fruit that once defined them. Let the sound of that last soft footstep fade into memory, like the clink of a silver spoon or the rustle of silk in a now empty ballroom. No more whispering, no more watching, no more wondering whether the pineapple's crown is too stiff, too crooked, too ripe for the room. All of that is over now. The fruit has been eaten. The invitations have stopped, and you're still here, breathing gently in the quiet. You can imagine the dark coolness of the cellar where the wax replicas now collect dust. You can smell the distant sweetness of a fruit long past its prime. You can almost feel the heavy hush of a drawing room at dusk when everyone has left. And the only sound is the ticking of the clock. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts soften. Let that spiky little fruit roll out of your mind and down a grassy hill into the warm forgetfulness of sleep. You're safe here. You've made it through the frenzy, the fashion, the fear. You can rest now. You can sleep. And maybe, just maybe, you'll dream of pineapples. End of script. Sweet dreams.